So I will remind Clara to press record for me, so we don't miss anything. And second,
Yep, we're all set.
we're all set. Welcome, everybody. We've missed you. It's the first event of the year here at Talkbase, and we're starting off with a bang. Um, I don't know if you remember last year, we were doing a cross collaboration series where we were talking about how different people in the community space cross collaborate with other departments, other stakeholders for community success. And actually, the cross collaboration survey that Talkbase is running is still going. So if you haven't had a chance to fill out your thoughts, I'm popping the link in the chat now. You've got until Friday to fill out that form and let us know how you cross collaborate, what you'd like to see more on within cross collaboration. Um, Make sure you do that before the end of the week. Now, for those of you who are seeing me for the first time and aren't quite sure who I am, I'm Valentina, your host and self-proclaimed unforgettable events expert. I'm hopefully going to get a little like R at the end of that soon. Let's see. And I'm excited to kick things off with a topic that has been talked about quite a bit in the last year, and this year it's probably going to come up a lot more times. So we just decided it was time to come together, lay everything out on the table, and that's about the community manager's role in 2025. What's changing, what's staying the same, and how you can navigate your role this year.
Mhm.
Joining me today, I have two powerhouse ladies. We have Clara, founder of Talkbase, and Micheline, founder of Open Space. And I'm just going to do a little bit of an intro for them both. So, after a decade of working in tech, Clara founded Talkbase, a community analytics platform that enables global technology companies to scale and measure community impact across their business. In addition to leading Talkbase, Clara is a member at Female Founders and an angel investor. Micheline is a community builder who has worked in startups and venture capital companies like the Wing and Round. Now she's building her first venture, Open Space, a brick and mortar co-working and community space based in Brooklyn. Welcome, ladies. It's great to have you.
It's so great to be here. So excited for this
Yeah,
conversation.
I'm
me
briefly
too.
going
Me too.
to share your LinkedIn's in the chat for anybody who hasn't connected with you before, because I'm all about the power of networking. So I've popped those in the chat for everyone. So we're going to dive straight in. I've got a number of questions that I'm just going to throw out there, and whoever has an answer that comes to them in the moment can go and answer it first. And if anyone has anything to add, feel free to add it on. If you have a question about any of the questions that are coming in, pop them in the chat. We will have some time at the end, or depending on the question, if it's relevant in the moment, I will stop and we will answer it straight away. But let's get into the conversation because we've got a lot to cover. So let's start with the general kind of outlook. So, from your perspective, what did the role of a community manager look like in the last few years? And I guess, Micheline, we'll start with you. What 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 did it look like?
Community, it's so nebulous. It's so hard to define and just it really I feel like community is one just super nebulous and it looks so different across industries. For nonprofits, it looks more like partnership outreach. In co-working, it's more customer experience. And even kind of like tied to sales, in real estate, it looks like residential happiness. So it's just so drastically different. But I think the unifying ties are, one, can you engage the community that we have, we're building or we need to have built, and content, how are you going to keep them continuously engaged? And I think that it's just it's so vast and broad according to different industries.
Yeah, for sure. Clara, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think in the last few years there has been we've kind of seen community kind of go up and down in waves, right? And folks kind of expecting different things, but I think what has been kind of a very unified, like a unifying trend was that there was always an executive decision made. We're gonna have a community, we're gonna hire a community manager, they're gonna figure it out. Like we want this right now. We want what XYZ company has. And we've seen many more cases of companies not thinking about community strategically, which could then end up in, when there came times of budget cuts and layoffs, community folks being the ones that were heavily impacted. Um, to compare to, those companies that really had community as a part of their strategy, whether it was their go-to-market strategy, their customer sort of success and experience strategy instead. And I think that's kind of one of the changes we're going to see this year, where we want to, and we're excited about it. We want to see more companies kind of thinking about community strategically and thinking about hiring the right folks because there are amazing folks in the market, doing great work, and amazing folks looking for new roles. So I think that's kind of like the biggest engagement the biggest like change and kind of how I've seen community in the past years, right? There's always been all these community groups are always started by this one person doing it all, leading the community, running the events, etc. Then we would see the community grow, and all of a sudden they would hit a wall, right? Thinking, how can we, all right, like this is great. We have a great group. We have great supporters, great fans, great members, great ambassadors. But how can we now kind of like integrate that into the strategy? I feel like that's kind of what we've seen a lot in the last few years.
Yeah, and it's great that companies are saying, we want to have a community, we want to have a community manager. It's just like what is the next step? And that's the first step is great. It's just like where do we go from here? Which is interesting because in in Evan Hamilton's recent newsletter, he shared that he felt like mixed feelings around where community goes from here. And he said that like we've made a lot of progress, which is what you were saying, Clara, in getting companies to understand the value of community. But it's the whole like it's the investment part and the strategic part that goes with it. So I guess my next question then is, what do you see or what do you think is on the cards for us in community this year, and how will the role evolve, if anything?
Yeah, something I've been thinking about and something that I've been seeing is now you have the bigger AI players
Mm.
hiring in community. OpenAI, they have a community division, Anthropic. They're not calling it community, but they're calling it program management. But there's like huge community aspects like tied and looped into that. So I think, I think what could happen is that you'll see like these larger players, especially in AI, who, with the success and visibility of the communities that they build, could definitely drive investment into communities. And I think what's interesting about that is particularly in AI driven companies is that they're not having like a heavy focus and scale. They're more like, hey, show me and show the world what can be done with our product. So I think that, it's more like a storytelling component that's also being added and baked into that too. So it's like, you're managing, some aspect of community, but you're also like telling a bigger story about an industry
Okay,
of
I think
demonstration as those teams develop. I think that other players will follow.
amazing. We did lose you for a minute there. I don't know if everyone else saw that, but you came back, and I think we are all on track.
Oh
Um,
no.
oh, it's okay. It's okay. No, I completely agree. Clara, do you feel the same?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is, and to what Micheline mentioned, right? The departments are called program managers, right? And or program management, and there's like all these different areas we see popping up. I think more folks and more folks are now investing in customer education, customer experience overall, where we see a combination of customer success and community roles being combined, or these folks being on the same teams with different titles as well. So I think what is going to be like the biggest change in the industry that we're going to see this year is that if a company has a community, they are 100% investing in that community because it's part of a larger strategy. I think like kind of going off my like initial point, like what we've seen in the past, we've seen like companies doing communities just because it was cool, because it looked good, right? Because they wanted to give back. And I think that's still the case. And I think if you are as a brand, as a company, as an organization, as a tooling, if you are investing in a community as a part of your strategy, I honestly think that that's something you can be proud of, right? There are a million ways to spend budgets. You can invest in ads, you can invest in more sales headcount, right? So I think it's a good thing if we're seeing a company cares about their customers and about the industry overall, and they want to educate it. They want folks to have a place to connect with each other. I think that says something about the company or the organizations that do that. And it's something I'm really personally really excited about, because then not just for the industry overall, we're going to have more and more organizations contributing to our community industry, but also for community builders themselves, right? If you know you're part of an organization that believes in the strategy, believes in what you do, hopefully our market will see more of a job stability this year as well. So those are kind of my two like wishful thinking thoughts. But I think that's kind of what's ahead for this year.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is a great way to look at it, and I only hope that that is what's going to happen, because we all know how important communities are, um, and the more investment that we get into those by the wider organization, the better, because they make such a big impact for the business. Now, we kind of touched on it a little bit in both of your answers around, community and leadership, but I would love to know if there's anything else that you would add on how you see leadership's view of the community changing in 2025.
Yeah, I'm happy to kick the ball off here. I think it kind of like going from what was mentioned already before. I think that that bigger part of the strategy like needs to happen. I'm so sorry for my screen constantly hovering. I have a little furry visitor on today's webinar, as I do on a lot of our talk-based events. But I think that what leadership teams now really understand is that I think it is that brand representation and how they want to build their companies. And I think it's kind of what they want to communicate to their customers as well. One of the other things that has been a huge shift in the way leadership is thinking in the last year, I would say, and that I think applies especially to the tech market and how we've seen the tech market take a big hit, but we've seen it in other industries as well, is that it is much more expensive now to lose customers than to get new ones. So customer retention has been a huge priority. And I think that leadership teams are now thinking, how can we make sure that our customers are happy? How can we make sure that they're supported? How can we make sure that they are leveraging our products as much as they can? And I think that's where a lot of the work of community teams comes into play, where whether we talk about education, relationship building, or general kind of building a relationship with the customer, right? I think community is all about relationships. I think that's what we've seen in the last few months. More companies kind of investing in that, and therefore kind of looking at their community strategy of, hey, how can we like engage our current customers? How can we make sure that they're happy? How can we make sure that they're in the community? How can we make sure that that they're contributing? And also, how can we make sure that we flag any like negative intent or any inactivity and any drop off to make sure that we don't lose those customers. I think that's been one of the things that that kind of we've seen leadership teams think about a lot. Yeah.
David's
And
actually said customer
oh,
attention and advocacy are the main benefits that we look for in our community. So it's resonating with a lot of people. Sorry, Micheline, go ahead.
no, you're totally fine. And what I'll piggyback off of that is just like lifetime value of a customer, because I mean, at least in my world where I come from membership driven communities. But every business model isn't focused on some sort of monthly recurring subscription or, has some sort of monthly or annual commitment component. So, I think beauty is like the perfect example, or just like e-commerce in general. So, but we'll take beauty as an example because they, I think, are an industry that does a great job managing communities and drive the needle on communities. When you go on Glossier, you're not going on to get a beauty membership, you're going to get a product, but it's like, okay, how do I now keep this customer engaged with the brand continuously, and integrate ourselves into their lives? So you have like the rise of, the continuous rise of like community management platforms, especially for beauty and content creation, that you see just to keep those people involved. So I think that's definitely super important to the equation.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. And if we're staying on kind of this community and leadership topic, how can community managers then better communicate their ROI and strategic value to the leadership so that they can be fully on board, they can fully understand why the community is so important?
I think that comes with like understanding what the business's priorities are and what, what the goals are. So I mean, but I guess I see that in that, of course, is going to vary from company to company. So what it may look like in one company, it'll look completely different in another. But I see the big buckets definitely being retention, brand
Mhm.
awareness, and of course, revenue. Everything kind of comes back to revenue because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a business. Unless you are working in a nonprofit, which is a totally, different model. Um, so if it's not coming back to those three things, um, it's going to be much harder to make the case for how community is driving the needle. So I think it's really just understanding what's P1 in your organization, and for membership communities, it's retention. It's always will be, retention. Of course, like driving revenue as well, but retention, um, definitely. But in, let's say, a more like, let's say more in like a context of like a Netflix, brand awareness, would definitely make more sense. And how are we strengthening our brand position constantly?
Definitely. Cara, what
Hmm,
do you think?
absolutely. No, I think Michelin covered like all the big categories, right? Like brand awareness, retention, revenue, like those are the things. But I think it's exactly to what has been said. It is communicating towards the priorities that are in your organization, right? In your business. And those priorities can be very different. And I think it's very visible now to kind of do the comparison, 2, 3 years ago, where when it was cool to have a community without a specific goal, if you were reporting on whatever metric you were reporting, it really wasn't your fault, right? If there wasn't an initial KPI, an initial strategy, an initial goal set up, right? So I think if you really want to prove ROI of your community, I think it starts really by going back to sort of the drawing board with your manager, with your leadership, and asking them, like, hey, we already have this group of amazing folks. There's a lot of activities we can do. There's always a million initiatives you can do as a community person. what is our goal, right? Like perfect case scenario, what does this community achieve? And then how can we make that happen? And then how can we split our efforts into reaching those goals, supporting our members, keeping our community's promise, right? Like making sure that this pace is engaging, that it's educating, right? Whatever the initial purpose of why your members have joined was. But also, understanding how are we pushing this community forward towards that one goal that we're aiming for, right? So I think it's kind of really like going back, understanding what the priorities are, and then taking it from there. And then having, I think, one of the other things that are important is having kind of realistic expectations. If you are already building a community that's very strategic, that is either supporting product questions, that is supporting customer reviews or retention, and that's happening, you just need to now double down on the metrics. But if you already have a community which didn't have this sort of like goal in mind when you got started, and you're already at thousands of members, or thousands of subscribers, etc., etc., it's going to take a little while for you to kind of shift the overall strategy, right? And making sure that you, first of all, keep again the purpose of the community, and kind of keep supporting your members in the way that they are, that why they joined, why they wanted, how they wanted to be supported, and that you're able to reach those metrics. So I think it really depends on, first having a look where you are, where your community is, and then second, having that conversation with your manager, or with the executives team.
Yeah. And
Um,
sorry, Micheline, go for it.
Go for it. No, you can go for it, Valentina.
I was just going to say, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, that was it. I was going to say that, if you are going to have these conversations and a lot of things need to change, it's not necessarily about changing everything in one go. If there's anything I've learned from building communities, it's, things take time. Rome wasn't built in a day. And as community managers, we're forever trialing and testing. And sometimes it means changing one thing, not the whole entire strategy. And even if it does mean changing the whole entire strategy, doing that over time, not having a conversation and the next day, doing something completely different, because your community may not respond well to that, and it could impact the retention. That's just my little tidbit from there. But Michelin, go for it.
Yeah, Clara, I think you brought up a great point too as well, when you had brought up like, essentially the difference between a strategic community and an organic community. Because I think that community has been constantly associated with just organic. It's just gonna happen. If someone is there, if we build it, they will come with no resourcing, to support any of that. It's like, yeah, you alone build it by yourself. And I think something, that it's two-sided, but I think something that we also have to get better at, as operators in community, is like measuring like the cost and impact of the strategies that we roll out in community, as in our function and role as well. To show like, hey, like this is how much, this retention that we have, it costs this much to do it. And or it costs this much to acquire new members. Now, how can we advocate, use that data, use those numbers, and keeping track of and measuring like the strategies that we are implementing? How can we then now communicate that for more resourcing? Because I think one of the biggest challenges of a community manager builder, especially in like a corporate or business context, and not like you're just building on the side, is leveraging and getting more resourcing. And community can't grow if we don't have more resourcing to back us up, which also means that, we may have to tie our work to other, for instance, community and events, tying our work to events and showing the outcomes of those events. And even though that's a different function, it's so heavily embedded into community. So yeah, that's my other 2 cents on that.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned like things being tied into one another, because if you look at like the titles, the community manager titles that are now coming up? I mean, I've seen lots of different ones, and feel free to let us know in the chat if you have a different title to community manager or you've seen something different. I would love to see some different names, but one of my favorites was happiness manager. So I'd love to know what other titles you both have seen or think are emerging in the space as potentially our roles get emerged with other sectors such as events, rather than just having the standard community manager title.
Yeah, there are a few. I kind of wonder which ones have we mentioned already, but happy to get start brainstorming here, and we can kind of see what pops up. I think one of the biggest, well, I think one of the most common ones has been sort of like a customer advocate title. That's something I think we've seen quite a lot, and I think it still can mean different things in a lot of different organizations. But I think that has been something that we've seen quite a lot, as well as sort of, customer education slash customer experience folks. So to that, we've seen kind of teams emerge. I mean, these teams have been around for a while, but then, a customer experience managers could have like different descriptions on those teams. One could be really managing, be the point of contact. Another could be helping managing forums. Another one could be helping managing documentation, right? So it's been kind of a combination of things, but there has been like one title. So a lot of customer-esque titles. I think platform and heads of platform is something that we've seen quite a lot in the industry as well. And yeah, what else? Let me think. Micheline, have you seen any other titles that I might be forgetting?
Yeah, for me, what I'm seeing a lot in this market is community and it's
Mm.
and brand partnerships and social media and marketing management. And I think, I mean, we're already doing this stuff anyway, for real, especially depending, I think, if you're in a smaller company, you're wearing like 500 different hats anyway. If you're in a large org, then maybe like you actually are just doing community management and moderation. But I'm seeing this a lot of so it's looping community with another function directly. And I would, I would say the big ones that I'm seeing are with this and community and partnerships, and specifically revenue driving partnerships.
Mm.
Um, I'm seeing that in the nonprofit context, it's looking like uh, partnering with, your local organizational ecosystem, whether that be to, get like potential, I guess for lack of a better term, clients, for that nonprofit. Um, I see community and social media. That's a huge one. You know, uh, Community and content, which I mean, I guess both of those things are pretty much the same, but depending on, content, maybe like email, newsletter focus, etc. But I'm also, I guess, like a more hidden, discreet um, title, I would say, would be something blank relations. So what I mean by that, creator relations, artist relations.
Mm.
And it's not building a community of, a massive community, but it's like I'm building a network of, advocates for, this product, helping basically on the customer education side. So I'm seeing more of like the relations management piece like come up.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. I think relations is a big one, definitely, and something we've seen around quite a lot. And I think it's either sort of that like different word for community or kind of different word for the ecosystem as well, right? Or kind of different word for like that customer relationship, where whether it's like ecosystem, network, platform, right? Experience, even like partnerships, you could say, right? That's kind of all like different ways of saying like this sort of like hub that's like orbiting our company, our product. Yeah, absolutely. And there have been some great points written in the chat as well, where I think if we have a little better understanding of the different titles and the different roles, it would be easier to kind of, once they're more specific, to distinguish kind of what's the job title, what's the role, kind of what's expected of you, etc. And might be also more transparent within the organization. But yeah, it's not just community managers anymore, from what we've seen out there.
And I
Yeah,
wonder like if that will ultimately end up being a good thing in community.
maybe.
Because if our work, because like, a lot of community managers are like wearing, it's a classic generalist job, where you are wearing many hats. So it's like when people just think, oh, I guess like for me, it's like almost like internal branding of, the function. So it's like if I'm just thinking of you as just the community manager, you just, post content to engage our community. Maybe when it comes to layoffs, I'm not going to think about that as much. But if your work is tied to social media, I might have a second double take on that. It's like, well,
Mhm.
like, we have this like following of 100,000 followers plus. Like, we probably need to keep someone around. And if they could do both, you know, that's my 2-for-1 special. So it may lead, I'm thinking maybe it could lead to like an internal branding shift.
That's
Hmm.
really interesting. We've got
Absolutely.
some comments in the chat. Someone said that they spoke to someone with the title CEO and it was Community Engagement Officer. So that's an
Mm.
interesting one. We've got some people that like the word engagement within the title. They say it summarizes the ultimate goal of what we're trying to do. DevRel manager. Um, things integrated with comms management and customer marketing, and people are also agreeing the community and titles. Um, I guess from my side, like there's somebody, for example, that isn't a social media manager or isn't a marketing manager. It then becomes hard when things are combined with other departments that you're essentially doing two jobs that would normally take two people. But then again, if it came down to the wire and, as you said, they're looking to lay people off and there's somebody that was doing the marketing and community, they would think twice about it. But it's very much a catch 22 because not all of us are specialized in everything. And should we? I don't know. Like it's tough. Whereas for me, like I am events and community, I can do both, luckily. Um, but not everyone can organize events. Not everyone can do marketing. I definitely can't. But we often find ourselves doing those parts um, because it either was part of the job description or it suddenly crept in after X amount of time. So really, really interesting. Talking about job descriptions, though, I wonder if you both have any thoughts on, you know, what we might see differently in a job posting for a community manager this year. Will we see any skills disappear, or will we see them adding more? What do you think?
I think writing is going to become, well, my hunch, writing is going to become more important than ever, because writing is so heavily tied to content, and if you can't write, you can't engage.
Mm,
So especially as, communities are growing, or communities are competing for audience share, what's going to be the thing, what's going to be the story, what's going to be the hook that gets people in, what's going to be the hook that keeps them engaged, because I feel like especially for a smaller community, if you're like growing from the ground up, if you can't write content that engages like the first 100 people, you're not going to be able to keep 1,000 people engage actively. And those users, they'll just drop off. And that can hurt the business. So I think that, especially, also in like an AI era as well. Now you have like people using AI tools to write, which I mean, I don't think AI has like really caught up to writing fully yet. Like it can write, but it doesn't have like the emotional nuance or even cultural nuance that you, the human, can bring to the table, the warmth that you can bring to the table. That's what AI hasn't caught up to yet. And I think, the soft skills are going to be really important. And, I, I mean, this is for me, like having worked in like member driven businesses, and we'll take Soho House as an example. Soho House has like, suffered a lot in recent years and has gotten like more, I don't want to say backlash, but they've gotten a lot more critique from their member base because they're accepting more people, so they're scaling more and more. The average Soho House has roughly 6,000 members. So now you are becoming a number in the bigger ecosystem. But what people want to feel is I'm warm and I'm welcomed here. They don't want to just feel like I'm going to go to Soho House to basically buy up drinks and food to eat there to leave. So if you don't have that je ne sais quoi to bring your audience in, um, I think, I think that's a skill to, the soft skills are going to be really important to lean into.
Mm,
Yeah. In fact,
absolutely.
Ryan, I think that's how I'm saying. She's put plus writing. All of a sudden, I write everything all the time. So it's definitely something that is becoming more and more common. But Clara, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think writing is such a under undervalued, like underrated skill, especially if you are a community manager that is interacting through online channels. You are always going to be writing, right? If you are, let's say, a community events host, I think that's like there are a few very rare areas where you kind of do the interaction face to face, or you get to speak instead of write, but that like main form of communication with your customers, with your members, most of it, I would say, happens online and writing right now, right? And whether that's writing directly to members, writing, you know, posts, all the way to creating content, that is a huge skill. And I think it's a skill that's been so undervalued for a really long time. And I think it's one of the reasons why there has been kind of such a big backlash and kind of misunderstanding of community in general. Because when we've seen a lot of companies hiring community managers, they wanted someone, to build a relationship, somebody who's a people person, right? Who can kind of talk to each member and learn about them and kind of, and I think folks were doing a really great job at that. But then you need the other piece, which is that sort of added value, that content creation, which then brings you more folks in, keeps them engaged, keeps them staying. And not everybody has that skill, right? Not everybody kind of can do, not everybody is a jack of all trades, especially if that was kind of one line in the job description, like, oh, and write articles, or like, oh, create content, or like write an ebook, right? Like that's a lot of expertise that you need to put together. And I think if you are putting together a job description, again, you really need to think about like, do we have someone supporting our community teams, right? Do we have a design team? Do we have an event team? Do we have a copywriter who can help? Or is this person gonna like what is their primary job gonna be, right? Is it really interacting with members? Is it connecting them? Is it sort of being, the face of the community who is, welcoming members every day? Or is it maybe content creation or anything else, or event organizing, right? We've seen, and I've spoken on a panel before where all of us were community managers and all of us were hosting events without ever like having that official title, right? Like all of us became moderators because we had to, right? Like that's another like very specific, that's another like very specific skill. So I think what I would love to see and what I hope to see in job descriptions more is kind of being like more seeing more explanations on like, hey, what are the things that you need to do? What do we expect you to do? And I think it's gonna be that sort of, again, the roles we're gonna see that are hired are gonna be linked to that like specific goal of the team, right? It's no longer going to be like build an amazing community to keep our members happy, but it's going to be, work closely with our customer team to make sure that XYZ happens. Or, being the voice of a customer so that our product team knows what the customers really want to see on our roadmap. So I think that's something that we're going to see more of, and I hope we're going to see more of that in job descriptions, because again, that's tying community and the role itself to with actual outcomes, which is wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
no,
think David,
definitely.
I see your comment, your personality and passion have to shine through your writing. Clara, Clara, to your point, of being a strong face, like community managers have to be strong faces. I think that is critical. You have to have strong presence, whether that be executive presence or, just being that warm face that people look forward to seeing and, like being able to prove that in your portfolio or folks like who have been members of your community, I think is definitely going to be important. And I would say now, as I'm seeing like this community and like relations or like your relations side like develop like right now there isn't like at least like from what I've seen like with the AI companies they're not having like a hard requirement for oh you need to have a relationship with people in education and creators or etc. But I say that to say in specifically as it comes to that line of work, what's your network? What network have you built? And for the communities that you have built, like, are you able to kind of retain relationships with members who have been part of your community or could be beneficial, to the companies? Because if you can always bring a network to the table, that's always going to help you and give you an edge up.
Hmm.
And I think that maybe we might see that more as like a requirement, like what relationships are you bringing to the table? I'm going to pay you $300,000 a year to be a community manager
Hmm.
at OpenAI. Bring me something more than just like your je ne sais quoi.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, that's so interesting. I think that what we I really hope that what we also see from organizations is, and kind of what we see more in job descriptions, it's like if you hire, what makes a great customer success manager or what makes a great, account manager, right? It is always a combination of really great organization that has good values and that person's character, their soft skills, their skill set. And I think what we have seen organizations do way too much is rely on those personal relationships that community managers build without them having the proper support. And I wish that that's something that would really change in overall job description, not you being compensated for the value and the representation you have for the company, and really being supported as well, right? Because we've seen it time and time again with our customers, that, if a community manager leaves the organization, you see a huge drop off in their engagement, right? You see a huge amount of folks leave the community because the brand was not built strong enough in supporting of that community manager. It was, the community manager was thriving despite the brand, despite the product. And I think that's something that like companies need to invest in more, right? Because that's kind of what I see again and again with layoffs and with kind of a lot of changes in the market. Great community folks, kind of, if they leave an organization, they take a huge piece with them because the organization was not ready to sort of like support that role, support what they bring to the table, support the relationships that they're building, and then it all goes to waste, right? So I think I really hope, like, I know this is kind of already diverting from like what the job description is going to say, but I think it's also something companies really need to do, is to learn how they can like really take advantage of the, in a positive way, of the impact that those folks are bringing to the table, right? And how they can integrate that back to the organization and then therefore support the community builders on their journey to be even more successful. Yeah.
We're going to see that a lot more because it's happening in journalism, like even a totally different industry, but journalism that's happening,
Hmm.
who's getting hired or kept after layoffs, the journalists who have some sort of following, like a real audience, their own communities, whether that they own them or, they have a large social presence, even now I'm seeing like corporations are hiring creators in-house. I'm like, it's actually kind of a smart thing to do because creators like it just yeah, anyway. But they're hiring those creators because they've already built their audiences and built their communities already. So, and that may even be like another avenue for a community builder. So if you own your own community like outside of work, outside of your job, you
Hmm.
know,
Yeah,
um, that's something that can be leveraged in the future that we're coming to.
for sure. Definitely. Now we've got a few more minutes left, and I want to get through just a few more questions because, well, one question, because I think it's going to be really helpful for those watching. Um, if you had to share one piece of advice for community managers looking to stay relevant, what would it be? I know we've talked a lot about, really like leveraging writing, but is there anything else that comes to mind right now that you would say people need to go out and, up level their skills in this or check this out or whatever?
Um, for me, I would definitely say this is a tough one. Um, but one of my pieces of advice would be to build across different build community across different industries.
Mm.
Um, because I think if you pigeonhole yourself, my hunch, is that if you pigeonhole yourself into one, either one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to be one of a few, for instance, developer relations. That's such a niche thing that there are really only a few people who can do it. So that could have maybe tremendous acceleration for you in the longer haul. But if the world is constantly changing and so many different industries are they're picking up on community, I think the longer term play would be to build across different industries that you're interested in. So being able to build, for instance, across like women, crypto, AI, that's just like a hypothetical because I think that'll just make you more future proof.
Hmm.
Um, Especially if an industry like, decides like, maybe the function, it just, kind of collectively, like it's just not driving as much as they used to, or it's not driving enough, and then the jobs dry up. I think that's definitely a piece of advice, and I would say find your and. Like,
Love
what are
it.
you going to master in? Because I think at a certain point, especially in an AI driven like, era, um, and where technology is keeping up with human capability, um, what are you going to do that's better than AI? So if you can find your and, I think that can also make someone like future proof.
That's some great advice. Clara, what's your one piece of advice?
Oh, that was some, yeah, I 100% agree with that. Let me think. I think it's really hard, and there are so many like little things and little skills that you can kind of like improve on, right? Um, but I think at the end of the day, community managers, builders, platform managers, how many titles we have said, I think the most important skill we kind of need to come back to is think, how can we like close the loop? And I'll give you an example on closing the loop on every single thing you do at your work. So let's say you are managing an online forum of customers and you see that there are two negative feedbacks that customers have posted on your product, and then there are 10 shout outs. That's great. Your initial hunch is get back, connect them with someone that they need to talk to, thank the members, send them some swag, right? Be supportive. But then what do you do with that information? And it's thinking about closing the loops. How can you take the positive feedback, share it across channels within the organization where executives, other teams should lean in and see what positive impact the community is having? How can you reach out to those members and maybe have them do a customer story with you? How can you connect them with other teams and get more feedback? And same goes for the negative feedback, right? If that happens, who are you connecting them with? Who are they talking to on the product side? How are you following back to make sure that their experience is improved? And again, can you turn that into a story? Can you turn that into something like, hey, even though they've had a negative experience, can they come back and they're like, hey, like there's always going to be something that breaks. There's always something that doesn't work out, but I know that this is a space I can come to and ask, and my problems will be heard. And that's just like one little loop, right? Like one daily interaction. And this goes on for all of your programs, for all of your leaderboards, for all of your events, for all of the campaigns and content you're doing. How can you constantly, like, how can you sort of manage this collaboration between, how can you sort of be the bridge between the community and the organization, right? And how can you not just support the members, but how can, the members help and support you and the community in the organization's lens? So I think that's like one of the skills that I feel like, and it's super simple, right? It's just like 5 steps that you do, but I feel like we can, as community builders, and the reason why I'm thinking about this is that I'm very guilty of this as well. We can get so caught up in sort of the day-to-day interactions and never-ending to-do lists and all the programs and things we want to do, that it sometimes may be hard to think like high level and say like, cool, how can we close this first loop and then move on to the next one?
Yeah, no, definitely for sure. And David's popped in the chat, also get really good at showing your success. And something that I do, which is a nod to Max Pete, I have a wins folder. I take screenshots of whenever something good happens, because there's a lot of things happening in our communities every day, and you don't always have the time to share them with the wider team. So take screenshots, make notes, put them in a folder so you can gather them. That way, when you're having a bad day or a day that you don't feel is as productive, go to that folder and look back at everything you've been able to achieve. That's my little top tip. Now we are at time, but I do.
So David is so right. I was like, I'm like, I threw them on my website. It's a portfolio. You could basically almost consider me like a graphic designer. For each of my experiences, I like leave them on my website. So people, whether it be clients or other, they can visit. I'm thinking
Mhm.
one little quick other thing,
Yeah.
especially if you're working in a membership driven business, or you really have to like be one to one with your members like more, and they get to know you personally. take your relationships take your relationships, like connect with them, like, because like once you do leave that company, like for instance with the wing, like once the wing went up in flames, um there's so many people who amazing people who I connected with, that I just didn't retain those connections after leaving that job. And it's like, well, I'm building up my own thing now. Like those could have been super early supporters, to what I'm
Mhm.
doing. So if you have a bigger goal for what you're going for, retain your community as you progress through your career, because you never know like when that can unlock new doors for you.
I'll leave everybody, I won't leave you with a quote, but I want to share a quote because I talk a lot about building your network, specifically in events, but it applies to anything. And somebody said this quote to me the other day, and I'm now using it for everything. Your network is your net worth. Take that with you everywhere you go, because somebody also said to me, like, it's not about who you know, it's about who knows you. And that can do wonders for you to progress, whether it's within the company you're already at, whether you move on, whether you start ventures like Clara and Michelin have done. Remember those things. Now we are at time, but somebody did share a question, or they wanted to ask a question, and I think it's really important because I feel like a lot of other people would have this question. And it was around, where is it? Sorry, one second. Do you see an intersection between sales and community management? After all, both industries are about building connections. Very quick thoughts on that from both of you.
Yeah, I'm happy to start here because it's been something that, as as a founder of a platform that literally helps you measure ROI on community, this is something that we've been thinking about a lot, and it's actually very simple, right? It's kind of understanding where has community supported the sales process that you're unaware of. because it takes a while to build those relationships. It takes a while to, nurture those potential customers. It, takes them a while to decide which space, which product to buy, which subscription to get. And if you're able to understand how community impacted that journey, you have just proven how important community is. So just being able to understand very, very simple two metrics is something I always say are a good starter for you if you really want to like intersect community and sales, is to understand how many deals has your or product sales has your organization made where community channels have been the source of that customer, meaning the customer discovered your brand thanks to your community, your forum, your events, your programs, your dinners, your meetups, whatever it is that you're doing with your programming. And also understanding how many deals and products, etc., sales you've made where community was a part of the journey, meaning it wasn't the source, but it was part of the journey, right? And it could have had a positive impact. Then, if you split that and look at the deals that were made completely without community, you can look at all different numbers. You can look at how much revenue was brought in through community, how much more revenue was brought in, right? How faster things went, etc., etc. So I think those are like the two initial metrics I always say to look at. Is there a part of your deal chart where you can attribute, like, say community was a source here or community played a role? And I think that's a good starting point.
Yeah, definitely. Micheline, do you have anything to add?
I think Clara covered it beautifully.
Amazing. All right. Well, we are at time, and I'm sure you've got a lot more questions on this topic. So I encourage you to come and join us over in the Talkbase Friends community. I'll pop the link in the chat here if you're not already a part of it, because this is a big topic that we're only just like, what's the word? We're only just opening the can. No, that's not it. You know the expression I'm trying to think of that I can't think of right now. It's really important because this is our careers, and we want to make sure that we are bringing our best selves. We're working in organizations that truly value us and the work that we do in community. So please, if you have any questions, come and join us over there. And don't forget, the cross collaboration survey is ending this week. If you haven't shared your thoughts and feelings around cross collaboration, whether it's in general within the industry or within the role that you're working in, please share that. The link is in the chat there. And that's it. Thank you so much, Clara. Thank you, Micheline, for joining. It's been a great conversation that we could talk for hours on this topic. And yeah, as I said, we will continue the conversation in the community, and I look forward to seeing you in the virtual world, in our community space.
Thank you both so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful Thursday. It is Thursday. Bye.
Thank you.